Okay, we have the green bars, we have the live counter sticking up, so it should now be live, which of course means welcome back to the Storytime Network. We've got a full cast here for the first time in, at least a month.
Ages. Yeah.
Hey kids, do you think there are any large-scale societal problems that are not caused by the British? Let us know in the comments, or chat.
Can we be blamed for the Second Amendment?
Yes, actually.
Why?
Because the Second Amendment was written in response to the British.
Yeah, but it's your dumbasses who keep it around now that we're out of the picture. You can't blame that one on the British.
No, we can blame that on the NRA and other associated dickwads.
But before we get too into the mess that is the
U.S.
history
political
of
system.
America, yes, and that in general, there's a question that's been eating at me for moral and ethical reasons.
Uh-huh.
And I'm very, very curious to hear you guys' take on it, especially since you're both authors, writers,
Yes.
or whatever we call that nowadays.
Mhm.
So, here's the scenario. Let's say you've regressed. Like, you are back at the moment of when you were born, but with your full mental faculties and future knowledge.
Yeah.
And let us say that you cannot, for whatever reason, play the stock market or do any of the common get-rich-quick schemes. Here's the thing that's been eating at me for a number of reasons that I would like to posit. Let's say you gain the ability to save, copy, and reproduce word for word an established author's book series / universe that has not yet been published when you go back in time.
This is just the premise of, what was it, Time Paradox Ghostwriter?
I have no idea what that is, but sure.
Weekly Shonen Jump manga that got cancelled.
Max. Yeah. Because the Japanese don't like plagiarism. That's not all of it, but that is the, in a nutshell of it.
But yes. Would you? And if so, why? If not, why? Discuss.
I don't like the ethics of it, personally. It feels wrong. To me. For a number of reasons, not least of which is, it's not even my work I'd be doing, it's someone else's, and I'd be getting credit for something I didn't really do. And I don't feel comfortable doing that.
Is it wrong of me that I'd want to steal Harry Potter so J.K. Rowling didn't get a miss
I
on
was
it?
gonna say, you don't necessarily have to steal something from a good person.
Yeah, no, I'd still feel...
You could rip off Harry Potter, yes. I have what is something of a middle ground compromise.
Yeah?
I would probably take a Chinese web novel or a Korean web novel and then modify it to be in a more general setting than a specifically specific to that culture setting.
Mm-hmm.
And probably because I'm sure you guys do this too, where whenever you're reading something, you see plot points and beats that you would do differently.
Yes.
Right? So I'm what if I just did my fanfiction / fix-fic for my favorite Chinese web novel?
I think that's more palatable because it's basically just serial numbers filed off fanfiction, which is what a lot of novels are nowadays.
It's also it would probably end up different enough that the original author might eventually do it again and do it would be distinct. So there's even a specific novel that I would use for this, but it's one of those things where while I don't like the ethics of it, yes, there are people I would not mind stealing from, and I think there are situations where there are things you can do to make it a bit more morally palatable.
I suppose so. I acknowledge that this is partially a me thing.
I mean, to be
Regarding
honest,
the
I wouldn't do it with any other series than just, some fucking shithead.
I mean, there's also just the thing of, what you call it? I don't think J.K. Rowling was always a bad person.
I can see your argument for that. I don't know if I agree or not, because we just don't know enough about her views and opinions, but, there are some red flags.
My knowledge of her going off the fucking deep end is most of her worst stuff prior to that was just, to me, coming from a place of ignorance rather than a place of genuine malice or hatred.
I can see where you're coming from.
At what point does ignorance become malice?
Yeah, that's one good thing. That's one good point. And the other thing is that there are plenty of red flags even in her earliest works.
I don't disagree with that. What I'm saying is, no single person is a bad person from the moment they are born.
Of course, yeah, no,
There's always an inflection point. There's always some breaking point that leads them down to a dark place.
Okay,
or
this
they
is a very
their environments.
Listen, this is a very Hobbes versus Rousseau sort of conversation.
I'm on the fucking side of Rousseau on this. I'm sorry.
I know you are, and I think you know where I stand on this.
Shut up, Hobbes, you stupid stuffed tiger. You're not bullying my nephew Calvin, okay? Stop it.
Listen, okay? You have to admit there is a large body of research that confirms that children are kind of little sociopaths. While they do have the basic building blocks of empathy, they have to be taught how to be decent human beings.
No, I know that.
So
also,
I do...
it is funny because the person that Calvin is named after, John Calvin, is a massive piece of shit.
Yes, no, I know. But, which is funny because of how good Calvin and Hobbes is.
Yes, Calvin and Hobbes is a very good comic.
It's also incredibly timeless, like that. Yeah. I saw that one of the comics a while ago about the dad talking about technology and how it just makes life more harassed rather than easier.
Mm-hmm.
And that was 20 years ago, and it still holds up.
I think it was 30 years ago now.
Was it 90s or early 2000s?
90s.
Yeah, so 30 years ago, and it still holds up. So I'm like, yes, but no, I think...
I'm gonna actually look it up, the exact run of the comic, because I'm curious.
Because ADHD brain be like that.
1985 to 1995. It ended the year I was born, Jesus.
So I think the general consensus now is that Hobbes and Rousseau both had valid arguments and both had things they were right about and things they were wrong about.
Yes.
But I think how I like to think about it is human beings are born animals, and we have to learn to be people.
By the technical you're right by several technical definitions at the very least.
Well, in the sense that animals aren't really good or evil, right?
Yeah.
They have instincts, and they have behaviors that are ingrained in them, and part of being a decent human being is learning to sort of go above and beyond those.
Yes.
Right? Becoming a person is, to me, the process of recognizing your base animalistic instincts and sort of understanding when they are valid and when they are not.
Sometimes you gotta trust your gut. Other times you don't. You should absolutely not fucking trust your guts.
Yes. Right? There are definitely instinctual behaviors that are quite good. Like, our instinctual social behaviors are like general. The basis of human empathy is instinctual.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, othering is also instinctual. Tribalism is also instinctual.
Yeah, because humans were originally tribal creatures, and
Yes, so it's like you have to pick and choose when it comes to the instincts, and a lot of people just can't seem to do that.
yeah, like I said, sometimes it's good to trust your gut. Other times it is very much not good to trust your guts. But yes, shit, what was I gonna say? Damn, lost my train of thought.
Well, yes, apparently Time Paradox Ghost Rider led us to the classic Hobbes and Rousseau debate.
Yes.
But yes, So, you know how this is going to be a more difficult topic for me to vocalize because it's a very thorny topic. But let me start from here. Tropes are tools. Yes, they're not
Correct.
inherently good or bad things for the most part.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, and I wish there was a better word for this. Are all stereotypes inherently negative? And if not, where do we draw the line between a stereotype and just a cultural norm that is different from the cultural norms we're used to? Because that's what a lot of stereotypes come from, I think.
I don't think all stereotypes are necessarily negative. I feel like some of them are just like very silly and dumb, but not like harmfully so. Like, there's a stereotype. There's the stereotype of Irish people being super drunk, which has a lot of negative connotations. But there's also the stereotype of Irish people fucking loving potatoes, which, you know, pretty neutral. Everyone fucking loves potatoes. It's just...
Potatoes are...
Okay, if you don't like potatoes, fuck you.
Okay.
I'm kidding. I'm doing the serious business bit. I am sorry.
But also, this is a revelation to me, and I don't know if we can be friends anymore.
They're too grainy.
How dare you?
There's multiple ways of potatoes are one of the most versatile foods on the planet. Surely there must be a preparation that you'll like.
Probably,
Yeah.
but I can't be arsed doing it.
Boil them, mash them, stick them in a stew. Hell, you can scallop them, you can fry them, you can bake them, there's so many different ways you can handle potatoes. It's like, again, as Fuzzy said, one of the most versatile foods there is. And it is a staple crop for a reason.
Well, I'm sorry, I don't eat very many potatoes, if at all.
Sounds like a skill issue, honestly.
It really does, yeah.
We should put that on the soundboard at some point.
Skill issue?
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Whatchamacallit? Yeah, no, every culture has, like, their staple crop that's due to their environment. Like, I know rice is, like, one of the big ones. And, so is wheat.
In the old world, rice, wheat, and barley are
Yep.
the big ones.
New
And
World,
it's
it's
still wild.
potatoes and maize.
And beans. Don't forget various
Right,
forms
beans.
of beans and squash.
Well,
You know,
I
they're
don't think-
sisters.
Those
The
aren't
three
starches, though.
True,
These-
but a starch is not a staple, and starch are not
Right.
mutually exclusive, like they don't have to be the same thing. Because you remember the three sisters: corn, beans, and squash. They were the staples of. Because like a staple it doesn't necessarily have to be the starch.
A staple
Like,
crop
fish
isn't
can be
not.
like for a lot of people, fish is a staple, right? Like
Well, I'm specifically referring to staple crops, not staple foods.
okay,
Wait.
but even staple crops, like not all of it's not always the starch or grain. Yeah, but beans are beans are a very common staple
Yes.
crop across the world.
The thing is, like, basically every society that doesn't have a staple crop is nomadic, to my knowledge.
More or less, yeah. Yeah, that's kind of the only way you can get around it.
Mm-hmm. Because you got, like, a lot of hunter-gatherer type societies, just nomadic, like, trading societies, stuff like that. It's just... Yeah, no, it does tend to force a more nomadic approach if it's not reliant on it, or at least, like, not able to subsist on a staple crop.
But yeah, I have I'm looking through my list of topics. Would you like to hear about a dream I had once?
Sure.
As long as it's PG-13, yeah.
My brother in Christ, my dreams are well, okay. You have to like be very clear here. My dreams basically never have sexual content for obvious reasons. However, they do tend to have a lot of like weird stuff.
Welcome to Dreamland.
Well, no, because it's like I can see what Mill is getting at with the PG-13 comment, but that just makes me mad about how stupid rating systems are. Did you know Balatro is PEGI 18
That's
in
funny.
Europe? Yeah, because apparently playing cards, even in a completely non-gambling context, is PEGI 18 automatically by default.
That's so fucking funny.
And yet loot boxes are PEGI 14.
Yeah.
So yes, literal gambling, fine for the kids. Playing card roguelike? No. That's adults only. But yes, Mill, would you like to clarify what you meant by PG-13?
In the sexual sense, yeah.
You know, that's not how my dreams work. And y'all know I'm something of a lucid dreamer. At least semi-lucid, if not fully lucid.
Yeah.
So this is something that happens from time to time, and so I used to be very scared of like creepypasta type things.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not that I used to be. I can't read SCP Foundation stuff. Because for some reason, even when I'm reading the most innocuous, like funny or joke or like cute SCPs, because there are some of those, even when I'm exclusively reading those, whenever I leave, like I'm on and like for a long time after leaving the SCP Foundation website, I just feel this like deep-seated sense of dread and anxiety.
I will get that sometimes, but generally it thankfully doesn't last too long.
For me, it's every single time. Go ahead, Mel.
I think the worst time it happened was so do y'all remember World War Z?
Oh yeah, I remember that.
And
The book or the movie?
I'm talking about the book here.
I read the whole book. I loved that was one of I devoured that book in high school.
Did you know the author, Max Brooks, if I'm remembering correctly,
Yes.
did another book in a similar sort of vein about big feet attacking some stupid tech fucking
I had no idea.
thing. Honestly,
No, I had no idea.
it's very good, but it's it is written from the perspective of the people, and as I said, while it's very good, it's not so great when you're living in your grandparents' house, which is very rural, and are currently living in a flat above the garage, and have to walk in the dark to the flat, having just read a fucking thing about things coming out of the dark and attacking people.
Yeah.
So there was a real moment of, oh jeez, I know I'm not even in the right fucking area of the country, but fuck, this is actually kind of scaring me. Why is this scaring me?
Yeah, but imagine that, but every time you go to the website.
Yeah. I would recommend. I would recommend that one. I can't remember what it's called, but it's definitely one I recommend.
No, I know. I think Max Brooks is a good enough writer that if it scared you that much, I need to stay away from it.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough.
Because I loved World War Z, but there were some genuinely unsettling moments in that.
Yeah.
The only reason I got away, I could read World War Z as much as I did was because it was in such a sterile clinical interview format.
Mm.
Right? If it's
Yeah.
a more atmospheric thing, Max Brooks is a good enough writer that I need to not get involved in that.
Fair enough.
Yeah. So that happens, and it was a big problem when I was a child because I used to have very big problems with nightmares.
Hmm.
Like the classic, the atmospheric, scary monster type of nightmares. Like one of the most major ones was I was in a. It was very similar to. I think it may have even stemmed from that episode of Courage the Cowardly Dog.
Oh boy.
Oh god.
Oh,
He was in the city and he was looking for something in an apartment building, and there was a scare / creepy thing behind every door.
Yeah.
Especially because I had major thalassophobia at the time,
Oh god.
and one of the scares behind the door was an underwater footage of a whale or something. And I was that scarred me. There was also a girl with a violin that was just terrifying. And so I had one of my recurring nightmares was actually me stuck in a hallway lined with doors on either side, and it was there was a layer of water on the floor and the constant dripping noises and hearing a second set of footsteps behind me wherever you get what I'm saying? My brain would craft these horror movie scenarios in my nightmares. And so, through the power of cognitive behavioral therapy, which I was doing without even knowing what it was at the time, I sort of brainwashed myself into turning myself into the monster. And as a result, my recurring dreams now are I'm in the same places, but the scary things are running away from me now. And this also... as a result, I don't have those dreams very often anymore. They're more fantasy adventure dreams now.
Mm-hmm.
But I did recently have a dream where I was visited by Slenderman.
Good old Slenderman.
Good old Slenderman, who was trying to be very menacing and generally trying to cause me harm. So you know what
the JoJo sound effects.
Yes. So you know what I did? In my dream, I was not even fully conscious. Like it was a semi-lucid dream rather than a lucid one, which shows just how deeply ingrained this is into my subconscious. I straight up invoked the power of the Lord.
The power of Christ compels you. That.
Yes, I straight up invoked the power of the Lord and went full cleric on the thing. There was like radiating light and holy fire, and it was glorious.
You got to use smite, nice.
Yes, I smote the Slenderman with the power of the Lord. But it's just I think it's very interesting to me in the sense that it's very similar to dreams I had, which were very scary for me. But the way, like the clarity and like the level of calm, because I had the fear was still there, but I think it's just very fascinating how adaptable the human mind is.
Yeah.
But my brain was able to like turn that around in that specific way.
Mm-hmm.
Just an anecdote I thought I'd share.
No, it's something again. It's something that I wish I was better able to do, because zombies still fucking scare me, and I wish they didn't. And sometimes I will have, zombie apocalypse dreams that are not great, and generally, result in some bad times. If I was able to just go, well, I know how you deal with fucking zombies. You fucking bring Necromancer T-Rex up to deal with them.
Oh, yes. The motherfucking T-Rex solution.
Do you know what the awkward thing is here?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The solutions that I've brought up that work for me.
Yeah.
Ironically, the one thing they don't work for is zombies.
Okay.
The reason for that is that zombies are just barely grounded enough in reality that my more fantastical thoughts just don't work out, because I'm like, well, if there is a zombie apocalypse, then I'm just gonna be a dude. Right? Like, as much as I invoke the power of the Lord in real life, it's much more subtle in real life, I think. As even though I am a very religious person, inherently, I'm fully acknowledge the way religion works in real life is not casting Holy Smite. And rolling 4d6.
Yeah, if only that was a plausible way to have solutions to real life problems.
Yeah, but like with things like eldritch horrors and like monsters and ghosts and things like that, I'm like, okay, yeah, no, I can. This is a fight the supernatural with the supernatural. But zombies are just barely grounded enough in reality that I can't do the necessary suspension of disbelief and mental gymnastics.
I mean, it doesn't help that, like, a lot of fiction has come with the basically plausible ways for there to be zombies. Like with The Last of Us, for example.
Yeah, that's the thing, is like, a single mutation that allows cordyceps to infect humans. Granted, it would be it's actually much more difficult than it seems. It's actually not a single mutation because of how much more complex a human brain is than an animal brain. Right?
Yeah.
The human brain is so complex and so delicate that introducing cordyceps would more likely than not just kill you than actually turn you into a zombie.
Which would have the same effect as basically a massive food poisoning incident.
Yes. Well...
Except worse.
Like a massive deathly disease outbreak rather than
Yeah.
food poisoning. More, I think it's more Ebola than Salmonella in that case.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say like E. coli or some shit.
By the way, I've looked up the name of the Sasquatch horror book. Obviously, you know, if you like Fuzzy and you realize that it's probably not going to do you any good, don't read it. But it's called Devolution, and it's story of a small isolated community of technologically dependent city dwellers who are suddenly cut off from the rest of the world after a volcanic eruption. In addition to lacking outdoor survival skills and resources, they find themselves under siege by a clan of Bigfoot.
You know, it's really funny. A lot of apocalyptic fiction has this whole thing where it's like, oh yeah, you have rural skills, that means you're more prepared for the apocalypse. And it's like every prepper's fever dream type thing in that regard.
But that's literally what the prepper.
That's what the prepper hopes for.
Yes, that's literally their wet dream is that their prep. Well, no, it's not really even that. It's not a hope. For a lot of preppers, the mental illness makes it a certainty.
Yes.
That yes, I am sure this is what's going to happen, so I know I'll be better off.
And it's also like a kind of an inferiority or superiority complex thing with those city slickers won't know what hit them. Well, I will.
Yeah, I actually read well, I didn't read it, but this is okay. So I'm gonna get into this. Actually brings me to my next point, which is does good writing excuse a bad message or views? And to what extent does it do that? I have two specific examples that I'm going to bring up.
All right.
Go ahead with your examples before I give a response then.
So one of them is called Paranoid Mage. It's an urban fantasy novel about a person who is essentially a prepper who suddenly who awakens their magical powers and realizes that there is a secret magical society.
Mm-hmm.
And so he isn't a fan of how controlling the society is. And so he essentially goes on the run. And apparently, the writing, the world building, the pacing, the action scenes, everything is very well done, from what I can tell from the reviews. Here's the problem. The protagonist is a libertarian gun nut.
Oh boy. Yeah, that's a bit of a deal breaker for me.
Which is like, I'm like, no, I'm not going to read this. But apparently one of the biggest complaints I've seen, even from the people who like that sort of thing, are the magic he awakens is like space magic, like portal magic specifically.
Mm-hmm.
And apparently the magic society they're in exclusively uses them as like couriers and porters and for transportation. And apparently he's the first person to realize it can be used for like combat. Which is just a pretty major plot hole, because like that's one of the most obvious applications. Yeah, but like his whole thing is using guns through portals to murder people, and is like he doesn't want to be controlled by the government, so he's like, no.
Using guns through portals is like one of the laziest offensive applications of portals.
Yes. But so apparently it's one of those things where it's quite well liked by a lot of people across the political spectrum, but that's because some people are able to get over the political leanings and projections of the author to read a story about magic gunslinging, which is just like, that's not something I can get behind.
Also, if you want magic gunslinging, you're better off reading the Dresden Files. Which,
Yes
for all
and no.
flaws, at least has, like, a less
Well-
problematic sounding protagonist. Somehow.
Well, here's the thing. I think the difference between the two is that for Dresden, in Dresden Files, guns are used as an alternative to magic. It's very rare that the guns are actually used alongside the magic. Which is
That's
actually
fair.
something I hadn't considered before. I wonder why that is.
Because magic is pretty plenty useful on its own. It doesn't need to be supplemented by a gun, at least in Dresden Files setting.
But it's acknowledged that there are... No, that's like, it's very much acknowledged that supplementing with gun is very effective.
Yes.
So what I wonder is
It's
why they
not
don't...
necessarily necessary, I think, is what I would say is the point.
So
Well, what I wonder is more
what are you
why-
meaning in terms of supplementing with gun? Like,
Well, no. So so here's the thing. Dresden and some of his allies often use guns as an alternative to magic, right?
yeah.
Because there are places where guns are useful and magic is not. So why not, like, enhance the guns with magic as opposed to the other way around?
I think it's because it would lose its more mundane effectiveness in, like, situations where magic isn't useful.
Yeah, but, like, you can have both.
Yeah.
You can have a mundane gun and a... You can go guns akimbo.
No, I was gonna say, but that argument falls apart if you just go guns akimbo with a magic gun and a non-magic gun.
Or even just
Um,
bullets, right? Swappable bullets.
Yeah. Did Ramirez not use, like, special bullets in White Knight?
I don't
I don't
remember. It's been a
so.
hot minute since I've read that one.
He mostly just showed off his magic in White Knight.
Yeah, whatchamacallit.
It might
But
be.
yeah, I'm like-
there might be some difficulty in, you know, in sort of, because how in the Dresden Files power system would you empower a bullet?
I mean, you would probably enchant it somehow, wouldn't you?
Yeah, enchantments. Yeah.
Enchantment!
We know mundane objects can be enchanted, like Harry's coat is a great example. That's just a regular coat before the enchantments got put on. Like, you can make an argument that doing the detail work would be harder, but there's tools, there's like very like... Those tools have existed for a long time. People have been doing small detail work for a long time.
I'm not sure then. It's one of those things of did
It might just be something that didn't occur to Butcher.
didn't occur to Butcher, didn't occur to Dresden. As you know, Dresden has a
Why
lot.
not both?
Dresden has a lot
With
of
how
blind spots.
Yeah, with how modular guns are, right? You could theoretically disassemble a gun, enchant the individual pieces, and then put it back together.
No, there is enchanted ammo.
Is there?
Marco.
Okay. Right.
He's
Good
got
old
his-
Marky
he's-
Mark.
He's got his fucking, you know, bullet dug out of fucking Nelson. Or he had a bullet that was dug out of Nelson.
Yep.
Right. I forgot Marky Mark was a thing. But yes, so the other example I had in this regard,
Mhm.
there's a story which I think it's complete. It's a sort of it's a dystopian story where the country, well, I'm just going to say it outright, the country in question is America, has been sort of like a second civil war has divided it across political lines.
Fun times.
And apparently it's about it's a character study, right? So it's like a very like character focused drama about I think a young man looking for his sister. And it's just about them like growing as people and things like that. Apparently, it has some of the best writing in the web novel site I've seen. Apparently, according to reviews. And here's the problem.
Oh boy.
It's very centrist horseshoe theory. Both sides are bad.
Hate that.
Yeah. So I'm like, what do you do when, like, what is the acceptable limit for good writing but awful, like, ideology? Like, where do you draw the line? Because I've obviously those two things, despite being quite popular, I'm like, no, I'm not touching them.
I am in a similar boat with you in that regard on those two at least.
But I'm wondering where the line is, and I imagine the line is different for different people.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what do you think would be acceptable for you in that vein?
I think, like, it has to, if it's like one of the core themes of the story, or if it's like core to the protagonist's character, and it's not like a journey of the protagonist unlearning their worst impulses or their worst traits, then I'm gonna have a much harder time enjoying it than if, say, it's just a thing of, oh hey, the protagonist is awful, but the protagonist gets better type thing, you know?
So in my case, I think I have found my my case. So as we all know, I read a lot of Chinese and Korean web novels, and Japanese ones too, but that's more in the manga space.
Mm-hmm.
And we have established there's some deeply ingrained cultural issues there.
Yep.
And I think I found that when they only come up occasionally and don't take front and center, I can usually get past it.
Yes,
right?
I am of a similar mind.
Yeah, like there are stories where, like, let's bring up the biggest example. Casual slavery. Just, no. No, I'm not going to, that's not something I'm going to engage in.
If slavery is part of the setting and the protagonist is, you know, not in any remote position to do anything about that, but does express at least some degree of revulsion against the institution of slavery, I think that is much more acceptable than, haha, protagonist is casually engaging in slavery without any remorse. You know?
Yeah.
I still don't understand how people like Shield Hero.
Yeah, it's disgusting.
That's an entire, like, there's actually, like, more isekai that do that than don't.
I know.
Which is crazy. It says a lot that about how low the bar is. That, like,
even in settings where, okay, so this actually is a very good segue into my next point, my next topic of discussion, which I have in my notes, word for word. The topic is labeled "Death of Genuine Heroism," and I think you can tell what I'm getting at from that title. When did we as a society decide that a protagonist who is just a solidly good heroic person is lame?
I want to say the Dark Age of comics.
Which is what?
The 90s.
I was gonna say the 90s as well.
Because it's been very irritating to me. Because do you know how often a I'm reading a novel, and while it's very good, the protagonist just lampshades. Oh yeah, these things are probably bad societally. Anyway, moving on. I'm just gonna do my thing. Where they're like, they like, it's the worst thing for me. When the characters acknowledge that something is bad, but are like, well, I'm not some sort of savior. I'm not a hero. And I'm like, when did that become the most relatable thing? Because oftentimes it's in protagonists that are designed to be relatable, and one of their traits is, well, I'm no hero or savior, so I'm not going to go around trying to fix the ills of the world. I'm just going to live my life. Why did we decide that that was a good thing? What were you saying, Jack?
Well, what I was saying was, like, I do think, at least in part, this does derive from the Dark Age of comics being like a time wherein the whole dark, edgy anti-hero was glamorized quite a bit. And, yeah, it just was a whole ass thing of, oh, hey, yeah, being a hero is, not about how good you are, but about how tough you are and how much you can kill the bad guys and all that shit.
Do you want to know why I think it started in the 90s?
Uh-huh.
Wrestling.
That definitely didn't help.
Yeah, I will say wrestling is
I'm not saying
probably...
wrestling started it, but wrestling copied it in the 90s. Like hard.
I honestly think that that wrestling and comics in the 90s probably fed off of each other.
Because having read a lot about wrestling in the 90s, there is a very definite shift from the, to use wrestling terminology, from the sort of pure white meat babyface to the sort of badass anti-hero type persona.
I do think action films didn't help it, but I am pretty sure like the Dark Age of comic books were like one of the big like cultural contributors to that.
I mean, what sort of other media was coming out in the 90s?
Well,
like in terms of TVs and movies and that sort of thing.
I'm trying to think, because you have Terminator 2 at the beginning of the 90s.
So, okay.
Which
I do have
wasn't that, actually.
I do have something of an explanation for that. The 90s also came with, I think, something of a relaxation of certain media censorship laws. Like, in the 80s, things were either more campy or even the more serious stuff in the TV show and movie space was they were like more campy, or they just weren't allowed to go too dark for legal reasons. Like, I think the movie ratings boards and TV ratings boards somewhat relaxed their criteria a little bit around that time.
That is due in no small part to the death of the Hays Code in the 70s,
Yes,
I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, no, but it peoples were experimenting in the 80s, but they went off the deep end in the 90s.
Yes, absolutely.
You know what I'm saying? Like, it was basically just a cultural... It was a cultural revolution. Not all revolution is good. It was a cultural revolution, but the problem is that we're feeling the after effects to this day. Do you have any idea how often I see stories where, and this is across the gamut, this is not exclusive to the Chinese and Korean web novels. It takes place in the West as well, and it's also like that actually leads into another conversation I want to have, but to continue this conversation, across the gamut, I see very often, for example, characters who are like, okay, slavery is bad, I'm not going to engage in it, and like maybe I'll rescue these slaves that are right in front of me. But it's not my place to deal with it on a societal level. Despite the fact that they have the means and the power and stuff to do so.
Yeah. I'm always much more understanding of characters who are like, I'd like to do something about this, but I do not have the ability to do so with my current capabilities.
And then, yeah, but like, there's characters who are like, I can't do anything about it, but then even if they do reach a level where they could do something about it, they kind of just don't.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Sometimes that's just the author chickening out. Sometimes that's just like the author forgetting it was an issue in the first place. And sometimes it's just a case of like the author doesn't actually want to explore that shit.
Yeah, but it's
because
just
it
like
would require a lot more complexity than they are willing to really take on.
But yeah, I think it's also the increased move towards individualism and independence as a goal rather than a consequence.
Mm-hmm.
Where it's much more acceptable for protagonists to just be more individualistic and be like, I'll take care of me and mine, but anything else is just outside of my
yes.
program.
The fuck you got mine argument.
Yes. And it's become like commonplace to the point that seeing something that's not that is often criticized. Yeah. No, it's often criticized.
Why?
Well, in many cases, it's because people have gotten so used to the opposite that they just don't know how to properly write it, and so they might end up overcompensating and end up with a lawful stupid character instead. Right? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like they try and go good, but they go too far in that direction because it's just become something so that people are so unused to that they don't know how to balance it properly.
Mm-hmm.
Like I was reading another a story. It was a very, very sweet fantasy story called An Angel Lives at the Academy, about a literal angel in a world where God is kind of dead. And the protagonist is just the sweetest little cinnamon roll. He's just a genuinely good and heroic person. And was really good until he did the thing where he was genuinely good even to people who don't deserve it.
I'm a little bit more willing to give leeway on that, just because, like, as fun as it would for...
Yes, go ahead.
Please elaborate before I go on.
I'm talking like genocidal slavers and plutocrats.
And he didn't even try to beat the shit out of them or remove them from power, is what you're saying.
Yeah, he just was like, they should be given a chance to repent.
Aren't you glad you let Fuzzy add context there, Jack?
Yes. Like, I was gonna say, there's nothing wrong with giving people a second chance, but, like, at least, like, if they're that awful, they should not have any grip on power whatsoever, and they should be, like, you know, stripped of their resources.
It's actually, like, it is a straight-up dystopia, where it's a world where people gain superpowers, except, it follows the logical conclusion of what a lot of superpower stories, MHA, don't, whereby they realize, the plutocrats and oligarchs also have superpowers. So now they don't even have the restraints that they had in the past. Like, in the real world, they have some restraints because they're aware that
They're regular ass humans with no extra abilities.
Yes, but when money literally allows you to buy more power with magical artifacts or just better resources to grow your magical powers, then you end up in an oligarchic plutocratic dystopia where not only are they in power like in the real world, but unlike in the real world, a revolution of the masses wouldn't actually work because one person can take on 1 million people if they're powerful enough.
So I would like to caveat what you just said with the whole thing of that wouldn't necessarily happen in a superpower setting because, for one thing, what powers a person gets
I should clarify that it's a progression fantasy setting.
Ah, okay, so the whole
where the powers grow stronger depending on how well you can train and what resources you have access to. Yes. Because it came up in Cradle, right?
It came up in Cradle, but Cradle did a pretty good job deconstructing that.
Yes and no, because, well, I wouldn't say it was a full-on deconstruction, because it's very much established that if you're just a regular person, you're kind of out of luck.
Yeah.
Yeah, right?
But I think Cradle did a good job of establishing that, is what I'm saying. It didn't,
It didn't try and
ignore
excuse it by any stretch.
Well, no, my point isn't that it didn't try to excuse it. My point that it's a dystopia. Regardless of what you if you take Cradle as an example, it's a planet of 600 billion people where the power is in the hands of 7 individuals.
Yes.
And if you are not directly related or tertiarily related to one of those 7 individuals, you have no chance of social mobility, essentially.
You're kind of SOL.
Again, it's there are 7 if you count the monarchs as exceptions, because they did all come from most of them did come from a relatively disadvantaged background. 7 exceptions out of 600 billion.
Well, there's also, different sages and heralds who also came from, basically nothing.
But, again, it's
very much a case of, I wouldn't call it a dystopia, more of a meat grinder world.
Brother, that's a dystopia as far as I'm concerned.
I wouldn't, as what I'm saying is, it's not, a one-to-one of this has all the hallmarks of a standard dystopia. It is a more specific kind of dystopia.
I guess my definition of a dystopia is broader.
Yes.
I think to me, a dystopia is just any world that is your only chance at happiness is either a stupid amount of luck or being born. Well, it's just luck. It's just you aren't your chances of happiness are entirely luck-based, because if you're born in the wrong place at the wrong time, just a passing any passing individual in the privileged strata of society can crush you like a bug. Right? To me, that is still a dystopia.
Yeah, I get it.
Right? I know social mobility in the modern world is largely a myth, but at the very least, if a lot of people can guarantee a certain quality of life. Obviously, I'm not, there's problems in the real world, right? I'm not saying that. There's plenty of... It is largely luck-based in the real world as well, time and place, where and how you're born. But the odds are slightly better, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
You just have a higher percentage chance of being born in a place where you can at least guarantee a certain standard of living.
Yes.
And again, there's the whole thing of the people in power have to have some degree of restraint, because if they don't, then there will be consequences that even they are not capable of brushing off. But yeah, I'm just like that story. I had to drop it, The Angel in the Academy, because I loved it. It was one of the rare web novels where the main character was a boy who was very cute.
Ah.
I really, you know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Like the androgynous, cute protagonist is something that I don't see enough of, quite frankly. Again, it's across the board. Even Cradle suffers from that, right? Like, Lyndon's a big dude.
Yes.
Is a big, scary-looking dude. I wish there was a Cradle-like story where the protagonist was a cute boy.
Because you like them twinks, right?
Well, I was gonna say more in the femboy direction, which is even further beyond the twink direction, I think.
Yes.
Would you say so as well, Mel?
Yeah.
But I'm like, yes, the I want a character, but yeah, it was especially because it was a Korean novel with a cute male protagonist. Korean novels usually, how it ends up happening is that every male protagonist or male character is 6'9", 420 pounds of pure muscle.
Oh yeah, like that one cursed yaoi image I posted in the server that one time.
Not quite that bad, but they're basically all hunks, like buff, tall hunks.
Yes.
And I'm just like, why? Why do this? Why does this happen? And it's regardless of whether the novels are aimed at men or women, as well.
Yeah, that is weird.
Whether it's a shonen or a shoujo, the male characters are always like very hyper masculine.
Mm-hmm.
And if there are androgynous characters, they're relegated to the side cast.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I'm like, it was a very rare novel where it was a cute protagonist. It was a novel that was gearing up for a harem ending as well, which is, again, not necessarily my favorite, but I applaud the effort at least. The character interactions were good. It was great, but after a certain point I realized, oh, this is a dystopia, and the real evil is like, it's very weird, because even the big bad of the series was like, oh no, the humans are the real evil. I want to wipe out humanity because they're like awful. And in the dystopian world that they live in, he has a point. The big bad is also literally Satan. As in Lucifer. It's a very
And the biscuit hammer?
Sadly, no. But yeah, I'm like, after a certain, like, the chapter that broke it for me, I think, was there was a switch in viewpoint, or rather, it's a third person story. So there was a chapter that cut away to one of the oligarchies having an internal meeting about the main character, and they were like, yes, we must exploit this new resource to death. And just like,
sounds lovely.
All of the good guys except the main, like the big goods, like the mentor and guardian characters, they're aware of this. They just seem to not be in any position to do anything about it. Like, they're aware that these people do these awful things, they just don't do anything about it because they're focused on the external threat. So, like, they're here literally fighting Satan, while the people that while the oligarchies are only putting in a token effort to fight Satan, and meanwhile doing their little politicking and power games and like awful, unethical, immoral stuff.
You know, I wonder what it'd be like if like there was actually someone writing a story of like, oh hey, there are actual powerful people who understand the status quo is bad and are trying to do something about it, but have like a lot of constraints that prevent them from just instant nullification of the status quo.
Well, that is actually it's similar, right? Like what I'm talking about. That is the case because like the big goods, right, in that series are like we acknowledge that the status quo is bad and we hate these people. The problem is we have our hands full preventing literally Satan from destroying our entire planet and making us go entirely extinct. So it's either we deal with the status quo, which will leave us weakened enough that we'll all die, or we struggle against the external threat, which will like slow down our extinction, and like maybe we'll be able to beat that eventually, but that will probably leave us weakened enough that the people in power will just swoop in and take us out. So that is a story, yes, where they are in a very lose-lose situation. Right? Like there are powerful people who could change the status quo. The problem is that because they have both internal and external problems, whichever they deal with will leave them weakened enough that they won't be able to deal with the other one.
Yep.
And I'm just like, what happened to my cute Academy story about an angel who is just very sweet little cinnamon roll?
Yeah, you came for a fun slice of life Magic Academy story, and you got Diet Cradle.
Diet Cradle with a much less hopeful setting somehow.
Diet Cradle with a pinch of salt and pepper.
More than a pinch.
You're right. They just dump a whole ass bottle of pepper into your Diet Coke.
Mm-hmm. So I'm just like, yeah, I had to drop that story. Maybe in my younger days I would have like continued, because especially with novels from that part of the world, generally it ends with, well, the protagonist lives happily ever after without really changing much of the status quo. So I'm like, I don't think I can do it. Which is a shame, because everything else about the story was so good and I loved it a lot, and I feel sad now. Y'all have anything like that?
Not that I can recall off the top of my head. I might, if I do, then I've suppressed that memory.
Mel?
I mean, I've had stories that I've stopped reading because they've gone in directions that I've not particularly liked.
Yes, I have done that as well. Or, like, there is also the case of, like, I read a story and the ending sours me on the whole thing.
That one area I was talking about?
Yes.
Yeah. It's just like how do you do... I'm sorry, I need to rant about this again. How do you do 48 chapters of fluff and then do a hard turn into lifespan differences in the last 2 chapters?
I don't fucking know. Maybe the author got axed and was bitter about it. There's a number of reasons the author could have done it. None of them are probably any good, but yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I think what I'm really understanding is that... Oh, right, okay. So, there's probably my favorite story right now is called I Was Kidnapped by the Strongest Guild. It's another Korean progression fantasy sort of setting. And it's essentially about an extremely traumatized individual who has no basic like trust in humanity because she's been treated like garbage
Mm-hmm.
for a lot of her life, slowly like it's a found family story about her slowly learning to love again.
Mm-hmm.
And like it's very sweet and fluffy. It's like one of those stories that will, it's entirely platonic, by the way, but it's just one of those stories that will make you need insulin because of just how, and it's sweet without being saccharine, right? It's like just generally, it's incredibly wholesome. But, and I'm guessing you were sensing there was a but coming.
Yes.
Here is the thing. The protagonist is interesting because she is an adult in the body of a child, which, okay, that's something that has some connotations as manga readers we all know.
Yeah.
But it's more realistically done because she is so traumatized and mentally broken that her mental faculties are also essentially those of a child. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So like, and again, they never like thankfully it's not that kind of story. They never like take advantage in that way. They're just like, they are a child essentially. Just because they're like, they have lived for more years than a standard child does not mean that they're not a child. And that made me think, as a society, we put far too much focus on how many years a person has lived to determine whether or not they are an adult or a child.
I feel like we've litigated this question before. Or at least something similar.
Well, it's actually, we had me and Mill had a conversation about this on Sunday, in a similar vein, where I was like, maybe the age of majority should be raised in some respects to 25, simply because of frontal lobe development and how much that.
So that
affects
study
your
is
thinking.
actually
Yes, I know. Yes, I'm aware.
I'm
Sorry,
fairly
go
sure
on.
I made the same point that you're about to make.
yeah, the whole the study ended when the subjects were 25. It didn't actually,
But there are like supplementary studies that show that after a certain point, development does
slow
go
down.
into
Yes.
decline. Yes. So like,
Well, what
I mean, go ahead.
What I think is like, people are constantly learning and evolving their thinking as their life goes on, which is why they were never able to find an actual stopping point in the development. We'll say actually stopped outright.
Yeah, there's no hard cutting point, but I think there are differences in degree. But no, I think the conclusion me and Mill came to is that rights and responsibilities should be separated to a certain extent. I believe. Mill, do you have a better way of articulating that?
You can have the responsibility, well, the right to, say, vote and decide on your future sort of thing, without necessarily the responsibility of having to, support yourself in a fucking awful job market.
Yeah.
Like, in the sense that, yes, people of all ages should have the ability to influence the things that will directly or indirectly affect them, especially in a political sense, or like, they should have the ability to get away from people, like younger people who should have the ability to have a support system if their parents are not acting in their best interests, and they should have those basic rights. But at the same time, certain more like responsibilities that require them to have like proper impulse control and proper like critical thinking and decision making skills should maybe wait for a bit later.
Mm.
Like, I'm not saying that their development stops, but when their like explosive development has sort of slowed down to the point that they have a more concrete set of skills.
Mm.
Like,
I do kind of want to.
Yes, go
I
ahead.
do kind of want to move on to a lighter topic because this is a lot. But
Really putting me on the spot here. Let me.
no, I have something.
Okay, go ahead while I look at my others, because a lot of my other topics that I have are in similar veins.
Yep. So just saw. How familiar are you with the music world of the entertainment industry, Fuzzy?
Enough to know that it's a corporate hellscape.
Well, speaking of, well, I don't know
okay.
if you
Can I just say one thing
Sure.
before you start? This is a lighter topic.
Yes, because it's Drake being a dumbass. And
Oh yeah, I saw that.
Kendrick Lamar.
That was really funny.
He's started a second lawsuit that is definitely going to just be an absolute fucking waste of his money. It's very funny.
His like the thing is, he went after the large corporations, and that's just never worked out for anyone.
Yeah, nah,
Like,
it's gonna go badly for him. Very, very badly.
His head is really so far up his own butt that he thinks he is important enough to go against an actual
Like a fucking record company, yeah.
Yes, a corporatocracy.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very funny, and also, like, Kendrick's just been nominated for 7 fucking Grammys, including, like, 5 for the song in which he makes an absolute bop out of calling Drake a pedophile.
I mean, it's, first of all, that song slaps.
It does.
And second of all, is like, the man is, like, Kendrick Lamar is insanely talented.
Oh, absolutely. Every single one of his songs that came out of the beef is really good. Like, if we're talking, like, lyrically, I actually think, like, Euphoria is better than Not Like Us, but, like...
But, like, one thing is, I just really hope that Kendrick Lamar is also, like, not a bad person.
Yes, I do as well.
But, you know, I've lost all faith in the idea of celebrities being, like, decent human beings.
Mm. Yeah, never meet your heroes and all that. Don't put people on a pedestal, etc., etc. Yeah, again, it is still extremely funny that Drake thought this was a remotely good idea.
Yeah.
So many of these people have more sense than money. It's more money than sense.
More
sorry.
money than sense, yes.
Yes. They have those dollars, but they don't have that sense.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it's just so funny to me when I think celebrities are in a weird place. Because they have money and influence, but if you really think about it, most celebrities don't have any real power outside of their field.
Yeah. You have a few exceptions here and there, but yeah, for the most part...
But they can develop a big enough ego that they think they do.
Yes.
So it's very interesting to me that, like, there's people like people who will not be named for liability reasons, who, but I'm sure you can insert any number of people, who think that because they have this fame and power and influence, they are somehow above the masses, even when it comes to dealing with the actual people in power, which is just objectively not the case.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and even some people who have, like, say, political power often overestimate how much they have, or how much the backing they have from,
Yes.
you know.
Especially when they start to have opinions that are different from the establishment opinions.
Mm-hmm. Or if they're, like, controversial enough or hated enough to get sufficient backlash. Like in the case with, Dickhead Supreme Matt Gaetz, who,
Yeah, well, let's not get too into it for obvious reasons.
Yes. All I will say is it is hilarious to me that he didn't even last a full mooch.
Yeah. I also
Sorry.
I actually have found an even lighter topic that we can get into on my list of topics.
Also, you know what I meant when I said a mooch, right?
Vaguely.
It's basically a reference to Anthony Scaramucci, who was like really short-running press secretary. He was like, what was it, 11 days he was in office or some shit?
Yeah. Okay. No, I get it now.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's an even I found an even lighter topic that's strictly media based.
Please.
So, dense protagonists.
Yes.
Right? Like, we all know it. We all kind of hate it in the vast majority of cases. Right?
It can be funny, but it's not. It has a lot of downsides.
The problem is, it's funny the first couple of times. The problem is that every author keeps it as a defining character trait for the entire run of their series.
Yeah, that's rough. It's not ideal.
So, we know that media trends evolve over time. Tropes change. Some tropes go in and out of favor. Yes?
Yes.
And I have noticed that this gets me into another topic as well that I'll bring up in a minute, but let me get through this first. I have noticed that there is a trend of moving away from the dense protagonist template because of the backlash. Because everyone's realized, oh, okay, yeah, it's funny.
It's annoying. Yeah.
It just gets really annoying really quickly. But as with all media and authors, people want to have their cake and eat it too.
Mm-hmm.
So I have discovered people want all of the benefits of the dense protagonist, i.e. the the shenanigans and the dragging out of any romance subplots and things like that. But they don't want to have the backlash that comes with having a straightforward dense protagonist. So I've discovered what the new dense protagonist template is.
Uh-oh.
A protagonist on a time crunch. Like, the new setting is, okay, I understand that these things are happening, but I kind of gotta save the world, so I have no time for any of the other stuff. I have to go fight the big bad or whatever, and I just don't have the time for attachments or, like, any of the stuff that, like... So basically, they are doing the same things that dense protagonists do, but they are acknowledging it in the sense that they're aware of the things that the dense protagonist misses. They're just using the excuse of, I just don't have time to engage.
Mm.
You get what I'm saying? This comes up most in romance, where it's like, especially because most of these series tend to have multiple love interests. So they're like, or even in a series with one love interest, I see this, where it's just like, okay, I understand that this person has feelings for me. Those feelings are very likely mutual, though I'm a bit more unclear on it. And the problem is, if I get involved in a relationship right now, it is going to prevent me from grinding enough to actually beat the big bad and prevent the bad ending.
Mm-hmm.
You get what I'm trying to say?
Yep.
That is a format and a template that I've seen come up more and more often recently. And it's a bit more understandable because there is a logical reason for it, rather than lol, the protagonist is just dense. But again, it feels like trying to have your cake and eat it too. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
You know what it makes me think of? Again, we go back to these examples a lot. Early Cradle was kind of an example of that. With the Lindonier and stuff.
Mm.
Where they were like, okay, yes, there was a point where they realized, okay, we're into it. In fact, it's even lampshaded in Black Flame.
Yep.
Where Ethan is like, okay, yes, I get it. You're hormonal teenagers, and also you are basically codependent and love each other very much. But we are on a time crunch, and if you don't get strong enough in a year, you will die.
Yes.
So that's the sort of thing I'm talking about, except unlike Cradle, it doesn't get resolved before the end of the series.
Mm-hmm.
You get what I'm trying to say?
Yes.
So that is a media trend I've noticed a lot recently. Any questions, comments, concerns?
Nope, not that I can think of.
Mill? Thoughts?
If I'm honest, I've been zoning out. I'm quite tired.
Fair enough.
Right, so you've noticed what? A reduction in the dense protagonist.
Yes, but using the same tropes as in dense protagonist stories with the excuse of, well, I don't have time for attachments or things like that.
Oh, okay, when you're saying dense protagonist, you mean in a romantic sense. Okay, that's so...
Not exclusively in a romantic sense. There's others, like, there's other situations, for example, where a protagonist just doesn't engage in like, there are other... I can't think of one off the top of my head, but like, what do you think of as what is one trope you see in dense protagonists in a non-romantic sense, then?
Let me think about this. My brain is not switched on enough. I mean, I guess my initial thoughts were, especially when you brought up Linden, was less maybe dense and more not very knowledgeable about the world.
No, ignorant. Yes, ignorance. Yes, that is actually another thing that comes up where it's like, you actually bring up a very good point. This is actually something that occurs in the examples I'm giving, because not only are they like using the same tropes as the dense in the romantic sense, they are often, the characters are ignorant of the world around them in many ways, and their excuse is, I don't have time to really get in depth and learn about these things because I'm on a time crunch and I need to prevent the destruction of the world or something like that.
Yeah.
right? So it applies to many scenarios where the protagonist is ignorant about the world around them. They are very like slow or not at all proactive on the romance front. And in the past, a lot of these were characterized by denseness, and in modern times, it's just a lack of time. Is the justification given. Because that is the case with Lyndon as well, right? Like, he's basically just missing a big education, which would take time.
Yes.
And for most of the earlier parts of the series, he just doesn't have that amount of time to put in to, like, learn and get a more well-rounded education and, like, focus on his relationships because he has to do or die.
Thanks, Ethan.
Yes, but at the look. But yes, but as with many tropes, Cradle is an example of it being done well because he actually addresses it in series as opposed to having a note about it in the epilogue.
Mm-hmm.
Right? The romance stuff gets resolved by Wintersteel.
And there's like plenty of the other stuff
and
in
then
there.
the ignorance part and the just general laser activity and learning part gets resolved in the time skip between Bloodline and Reaper. So it does get resolved. In most other stories, however, with similar tropes of the time crunch, it doesn't get resolved until the end of the series.
That's annoying.
Yes. So yeah, I think it is a step in the right direction, I think.
It definitely feels more narratively justified than, just making up bullshit.
We're making it just so that the protagonist is, like, often they have to do extra explanation and justification and mental gymnastics for why the protagonist is so stupid than if they had just not done the dense subplot.
Yes. Like, you have protagonists who are denser than a fucking neutron star. It's like, come on. Really?
Yeah. Where it just does not make sense. They're dense to a point where it doesn't make sense for them to be functioning.
Yes.
In the way they are. Or like, so it's something I've noticed, and I think it is a step in the right direction. But it's in the same vein as the progression, as the natural growth and progression of Battle Shonen. We do seems to be in a life of 2 steps forward, 1 step back at the minimum. As we've seen with stuff like Demon Slayer and JJK.
I honestly don't think JJK's ending was that terrible.
It's not the ending that I take issue with. It's the arc preceding the ending.
Ah, yes, the Sukuna cycle, everyone's favorite.
The Sukuna glazing cycle, yes, where Sukuna was just balls deep in Akutami, and Akutami was loving every minute of it. Where he was just like any other character in a similar situation would be like, okay, this is just not realistic anymore. It's the Diabolos Ex Machina, right?
Yes, just the good old Diablo.
Just because the Deus Ex Machina is happening on the side of the villain doesn't make it any less a Deus Ex Machina.
Yes.
Or bad.
Yeah, no, I'm inclined to agree. Like, making as an additional note to that, like, making a story like darkness and tragedy do not inherently make a story better.
Yes.
I feel like that is not emphasized enough by people, or not understood enough by people. But just because something has, like, dark elements or something has a tragic turn does not make it an inherently superior work of art. And sometimes trying to force darkness into a story will make it a worse story than it was prior to that element being added. Especially if it... That is actually not what I was referring to, and yeah, no.
To a certain extent, though.
MHA is not nearly the most egregious offender.
No, of course it's not, but it's like, there are still some very... It's relevant to the conversation, I think.
Kinda. Not really. But what I'm getting at is, like, there's also the idea, the thing of, like, predetermined outcomes. Like, if you have a set tone for a story and you want to stick to it, that's all fine. But if the story changes tone at some point, and
I see. Yes. Okay. Mm-hmm.
If the story changes tone at some point and you decide to swerve back to that initial tone, it will be fucking whiplash.
Of Oshinoko.
Precisely what I was getting at, yes.
I mean, even big chunks of later Kaguya post-confession.
Honestly, Kaguya is not that bad as...
It's not that bad because it ended, like, nicely.
Yeah,
but...
no, like, the final major arc had issues, but overall, I feel like Akka course-corrected well enough with the epilogue chapters that it worked out.
Yeah. But yes, Oshinoko is very much a glaring example of that.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, just because, like, stories evolve over time, and you have to accept that to a certain extent.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if the intended ending of the story that you've planned from day one clashes with the tone that the middle of the story has taken, then that's a skill issue. That's the author's fault. That's no fault of the audience.
Mm-hmm.
If you yourself have written the story to go in a different direction, and you don't recognize that and adapt accordingly, then that's a you problem entirely.
Precisely. And hell, that was like, there was a similar problem with How I Met Your Mother, where they had a pre-planned ending.
Yes, that was the proto example, yeah.
They had a pre-planned ending, and by the time they got to the ending, it no longer fits.
Yeah, because, again, the series changed over time.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't adapt.
Yep. Well, they were kind of forced into a corner by the fact that they had already filmed the parts of the ending that was, like, the most, I wouldn't say essential, but, like, the most obvious. The most obviously affected by the change in, like, the direction of the story.
Yeah.
Because, yeah. It's just... It's not good. It did not go well, because, like, it would have worked after Season 1 or Season 2. But they had
8 seasons.
Well, they had 6 seasons in which that changed. Like, Seasons 3 through 8 changed that whole paradigm.
Changed the whole paradigm. It changed the group dynamic. It changed everything.
And then Season 9 revolves around a relationship that is going to be abruptly ended in the finale. And it's like, you thought this was a good idea. Why did you think this was a good idea? To stick with this rather than just swallowing your pride and changing things.
Yeah, that's very much one of the proto examples of that. I'm sure there are other examples that we are just not thinking of in the moment.
Game of Thrones is the other one I can think of.
Game of Thrones is a different... I think is a very different
it's a
story.
Bit of a different beast, but they had an ending that they were trying to get to, and they forced the characters and story to work in inorganic directions to reach that endpoint rather than just, tweak things.
especially when they ran out of source material.
Yeah, and they
That's
also,
really when
I also think they could have pulled off the ending if they had more time to work with. But Benioff and Weiss decided, no, fuck it, we're rushing through the ending of the story because we want to work on Star Wars. And then they promptly got booted from the project because of how bad the reception was to the ending of Game of Thrones. That's karma, bitch!
Yep. So yeah, it's one of those things where I think it's the evolution of storytelling and generally the improvement in quality in some respects is something I'm a fan of. But it is very much evolution in the sense that it is a gradual process.
Yep. Oh yeah, I
And-
love the whole thing of people misunderstanding what evolution is. Evolution is gradual. It does
Listen.
not happen all at once.
Listen, Pokemon has done a lot of damage to the world.
Yeah,
In
I
many
feel it
ways.
would have done less if people were, more able to distinguish between, a fictional children's game and a real scientific phenomenon.
Yeah, but that would mean people had media literacy, and we know they don't.
I blame the school system for that.
Can't blame that one on the
Listen,
British.
I'm not. Okay.
I can blame British schools for British media.
No.
literacy.
Okay. So there is a way to blame the British for that, but look, would you like me to take you on the journey?
Oh, please, I want to see how this goes.
So, the root of all evil is capitalism, which began
Yes.
with colonialism, and
Good old John Smith.
the issue with the education system is that education is inherently a bad thing for the people in power, and as a result, they will do whatever they can to cripple the education system, and that is a power base that began with colonialism and industrialism, which was largely British in many ways.
Can't forget about the British East India Company and all the shit that happened with that.
So yes, because education is a tool of the proletariat that allows them to resist the bourgeoisie are naturally inclined to stifle it as much as possible, and that is very reflected in America's education system.
I question whether you can blame the British for capitalism.
Colonialism was to blame for large-scale capitalism and industrialization and colonialism, and the British were, I will say, the British do not have the sole blame, but they were one of the major players. Like, the Dutch and the Portuguese and the Spanish were involved as well, and the French.
And the Belgians.
Europe.
Don't forget the Belgians.
Yes,
How
no,
can we forget the Belgians? Good old Leopold II.
yeah, so
Everyone's least favorite Leopold.
basically that European bloc
Basically
was-
most of Western Europe.
yes, was the source of the capitalism that is in power today. And many modern plutocrats can trace their roots back to that time. So it's not entirely the British's fault, but, like, they were involved.
I still say
Yes,
you
no.
can't. I still say you can't blame the British for the Americans' crappy education system.
No, that's
Well, the thing is-
corporations.
That's corporations, that's capitalism, but also education systems throughout the world are essentially very strictly monitored, controlled, and censored by most of the plutocrats.
Why do you think they're pushing so hard for private schools here?
Well, no, like that's an example. Is the difference between private and public education in England is a very glaring example. The just state mandated propaganda attached to education in like Russia and China is another thing.
You know, on a slight sidebar, Mel, you already know about this because you're British. Do you know what they call like the boys at the heads of the like houses in British private schools, Fuzzy? Head boys.
I am aware of this from Harry Potter, but it's still funny.
It is very funny. They could not have realized the innuendo back when they first established the system, but it is fucking hilarious nonetheless.
But here's the thing. Given that a lot of private schools are one-gender boarding schools...
Oh, a lot of gay stuff happens.
Yeah. Yeah. I imagine there were quite a lot of head boys, if you know what I'm saying.
Hold on, I think I have. Yep.
Oh my.
But yeah, whatchamacallit. Speaking of the British.
Oh boy.
You want to know what else you can blame on the British?
Oh.
Suits.
Suits are good though.
I know. I'm just kidding.
Yes, okay.
But no. And with regard to the blame, that is. But yeah, the dude who invented suits, though, or quote-unquote invented suits, was a British dude, though. Who was actually kind of cool, especially by the standards of his time.
But yeah, just to go back to what we were talking about the evolution of writing. Yes, it is a gradual process, and we've seen that as each generation of new writer sees what came before them, recognizes the good points and the flaws, and iterates upon them. Right? It is a thing that's happening, and that sort of thing I talked about where the dense protagonists have been replaced by the time crunch protagonist. That's one of them. That's one of the ways that happens. The general improvement of battle shonen, overall, is another one. And it is good to see. The problem is, because it's a gradual process, we get a lot of these transitional phases, Animorphs style. Like Demon Slayer, for example, is a big example.
Yeah. I feel like it's funny. Black Clover was, like, always the dunking bag of, like, its generation. And yet, out of all of its cohort of manga, it's probably going to have the best ending by far.
That said, it's not without its own problems.
It's not without problems, but it is kind of impressive.
I mean, Jack and I talked about this, Thursday?
I think so.
Like,
yeah.
I will forever give Black Clover props for doing something that so few shonen actually managed to do, which is keep its extended cast relevant.
Yes. We were gushing over the, especially, the Magna Dante fight, which is...
That's one of the best fights in modern shonen, bar none.
Yes. No, I agree.
Both in terms of choreography and thematic plot beats, that is one of the single best fights in modern shonen.
Yes, exactly. We are in agreement with you on that.
Yeah, it's great. But it also has a lot of the failing points. Speaking of dense protagonists,
yeah.
I don't blame Asta for being dense because he very clearly lacks formal education.
No, that excuse doesn't fly because Yuno is properly educated, even though they grew up in literally the same place. He's just dumb.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with being dumb, in fairness, and...
I think... Yeah. So here's the thing. Stupid protagonists can be done well if And as long as that's not the only thing they've got going for them, and I feel like Asta is probably, in terms of balance between stupidity and other things going for him, he's definitely on the tilts more towards stupidity.
I
Again,
think he has a lot more going for him than other similar protagonists.
he's definitely more of a character than Goku, for example.
I wouldn't put him on like the S tier with like say Luffy.
No,
I
I was
think
gonna say
he's a solid A tier protagonist.
I would not go that. I would put him in B. I would not go as far as A. I think I reserve A for like maybe Yuji.
Yuji is a good one, yeah.
Someone like that, right? Like I reserve A for like some of the JJK protags, but I reserve S for the real, like, Luffy is, again, we always go back to, when we're talking about Western fantasy or progression fantasy, we always go back to Cradle, and when we're talking about manga and shonen, Battle Shonen, we always go back to One Piece, because those are kind of the
peak
master classes, yes, in their respective categories.
I do want to say, like, we do gotta do a shonen protagonist tier list at some point.
Have we not already?
We probably have, honestly.
We might have. We'll have to look. If we haven't, I'm shocked. We did an anime protagonist one, not a shonen protagonist.
Okay, so we've done enough. We've done enough tier lists involving those characters that I'm pretty sure we've said all we can say about why we like or dislike those characters.
Probably.
I feel like a formal shonen protag tier list would just be redundant at this point. But yeah, I'm like, Luffy, yes, he's dumber than a bag of bricks.
He has a surprising amount of emotional intelligence, though.
Yes, he has very high emotional intelligence, and very, like that's something that Asta lacks a great deal. Yes, he cares about people, but in terms of, like, interacting with people in an emotionally intelligent way, I think Asta is lacking in many ways.
He is, but at the same time, he is also a lot more, like, he's very visibly charismatic regardless.
Well, charisma is a separate thing, I think. Charisma and emotional intelligence are... There's some very stupid people who are very charismatic, Jack.
Oh, you don't need to tell me.
Yes, no, you are the last person I need to tell, I think. But, yes, charisma is a separate thing. I don't really qualify that in terms of emotional intelligence. But Luffy's charismatic too, but he is someone who grows as a person, who has deep levels of empathy, but also expresses that empathy in a very constructive way.
Mm-hmm.
Right? He doesn't just feel outraged about something happening and then just move on with his life. He, like, gets involved. And he just has, like, the way he's like you can say that, oh yeah, but he's stupid, like, with the Hancock stuff. But the thing is, he does deeply care about her as a friend and is very considerate of her whenever possible. He just is Arrow Ace.
Yes, very, very, very ace.
Yeah, he just and the kind without a hole in it.
God damn it! God damn it!
The character deserved what he got, but I always feel sad for everyone around him.
Yeah.
No, I don't feel sad for making the joke because the character got what he deserved. Literally everyone who loved and cared about him told him to drop it. And he refused. And that led to his death. That was his
character. That was his fatal flaw, and
that was his. I get it.
Nowhere.
I get it. But it's just like he's been shown to be able to compromise before, which really is what got to me. But anyway, but yes, Luffy versus Asta just shows, like, even have y'all read chapter 1131?
That's the most recent release chapter, yes.
On Manga Plus, yes.
Yeah.
Just, did you, like, that, the moment I felt like audibly giggled and felt giddy when he immediately went Gear 4 the moment Shanks' name came out of Loki's mouth in that way.
Yeah, because he was shit talking his like idol.
Yeah, and he was just like, listen, I will be very cheerful and like I have very few lines, but I am not dumb. You cannot get away with casually disrespecting the people I care about around me. And it's like that.
I mean, yeah, it goes back to, you know, one of Shanks's first lessons on screen, which is, you know, mess with me all you want, but if you start talking shit about my friends, we're gonna have a fucking problem.
And that's a level of emotional maturity that, and again, it's a show don't tell thing, right? Like, yeah. I'm sure we are told that Asta has similar traits, but it's just shown so much better in like how the characters interact in One Piece. Also, I now understand why Oda decided to have the drum like Alabasta crew for being kidnapped, because like that. Yeah, I have to admit, I'm not someone who is particularly nostalgic about Vivi. Like, she got a treatment that I think was disproportional relative to other characters who have similar roles as her, but the X on the forearm got me. Yep.
Because here's the thing, Fuzzy. You are not immune to the Alabasta farewell.
I know. If you are, you have no heart. But yeah, no, it's like it got me. And the irony of everyone who can see it being the people who joined after that point is just very funny to me.
Yeah, no,
it's a very good,
clever.
It's a very clever way of both escalating the tension and also doing a callback.
Yeah, no. Oda's just in a league of his own when it comes to writing. It's very, very, very hard not to just, like, see what Oda does. It was like, it's honestly unfair to compare anyone else to Oda.
Yeah, but my point is, a stupid protagonist is not inherently bad, but when that stupid protagonist is, like, uniformly stupid and doesn't learn or grow, that's when it gets grating. Because
I don't agree there.
He's a fun protagonist, but he hasn't really grown that much as a person throughout the course of the series.
I do think he has grown. It's just not super in your face.
It's not super in your face, but also there's like, it's the degree. Again, it's a show don't tell sort of situation, right? It's just not shown in a way that is satisfactory for me personally.
I can see that.
Black Clover is actually another one of those series where I have a similar issue of, oh, these are people who are capable of changing the status quo, they just choose not to. Like the nobles banishing them, that trial chapter made me just deeply upset for a number of reasons. It almost made me drop the series. Because, again, it's not like these people are powerless. It's not like the people who know why the status quo is bad are in a position of weakness.
They kind of are in a position of weakness at that point, though, because, you know, this was just after.
Like, in a way, but I'm talking about on a more broad strokes, as opposed, not that specific scenario. In that specific scenario, yes, they're in a position of weakness, but in a more general sense, you know what I'm trying to say?
Yes.
Like, in a more general sense, the people who agree with them are also in positions where they can affect change. They have allies, right? That's one of the things, is that like as the series goes on, the different brigades go from like sort of semi-adversarial to more friendly rivalries where they actually are invested in each other's well-being, and most of those people have an understanding that the status quo is bad and just don't do anything about it.
I honestly think it might be a case of less that they don't do anything about it, and more that they don't know how to do something about it. Because you gotta remember, Fuzzy, all these folks are warriors and at best like some slightly competent administrators. They're not like bureaucrats, politicians, or anything like that. They don't know the workings of a government. Or if they do, they don't know much about it. For the most part.
Yeah, I think there's something to be said for that argument. I do have some counter arguments to that respect, but I don't think we want to get into it right now. But my point is that stupid protagonist, not inherently bad, but you need to do it right, or it's annoying.
What I will say about Black Clover is that at the very least Julius is trying.
Yes, that was good, that he was a reasonable authority figure who was like doing his best.
But the point is, of course, that he's tackling societal views that are firmly ingrained, and it takes time. And while he is, very powerful, he's not necessarily all-powerful.
It's kind of a Superman problem, honestly.
It's funny, because time is his whole thing.
That's the other thing. He still has a fair amount of morals. He's not just going to kill the entire royal family or at least kill the king to stop him from being a fucking idiot.
Yeah, he's not gonna go full Superman Red Sun or anything like that.
It's very Gojo. Like there's a Gojo parallel here.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Gojo's another very good example of that, but Gojo does hit a breaking point, though.
Yes, and at one point he's like, yeah, okay, while gradual change is the solution, we need a Band-Aid, and the Band-Aid is murder.
Yes.
Which, you know what?
Blame him for it at that point.
I'm actually very happy. I was upset about a lot of the way the final arc handled things. That was not one of them. I was quite happy with that. I wish more series would explore that. Now, granted, there are probably repercussions to that were not explored, that could be explored, but that was a very interesting solution. This brings up one last thing that I've been thinking about a lot. Is Superman, who is the kind of epitome, like the proper, well-written Superman. You know which kind I'm talking about.
Yes, I know, like Superman versus the Elite, for example.
Yes. A proper, well-written Superman, or a proper, well-written Captain America, are kind of the epitome of... Superman is more applicable here. They're kind of the epitome of the hero. Like the genuinely good person who wants to make a positive difference in the world. But when you think critically about Superman and heroes like him, because there are others, there are characters who are just genuinely heroic people who are very powerful and maybe even to the point of being almost all powerful. But you run into a problem where, because these heroes are people too, they need to have a certain selfishness built into them to function. An example of this is, while Superman's power is almost entirely at the whim of the author, it is a pretty established fact that he can basically hear everything going on, at least in his city.
Yes.
But here's the issue with that. This means that Superman is actively filtering out every case of, like, domestic violence or assault or abuse that's going on.
Not necessarily, actually.
Yeah, well,
It might actually be a case of he's taking care of these, it's just not shown on screen.
well, no. Yes and no. Because here's the thing. He no matter, like, he can't always be there.
Yeah,
Do you know what
it's
I'm saying? When
one
he
of
is,
the
like,
big-
on duty, sure, he's taking care of everything when he's on duty, but his powers don't go away when he's spending time with his family or, like, doing his day job as Clark Kent. And statistically speaking, there is no way he has not ignored a person who needs help because he has his own life. And
Well,
I
there's
think
also
it's
the
unfair
sense
to
of-
expect otherwise.
there's also just the sense of Superman has limitations, the limitation of there is only one Superman.
Yes, exactly. So I'm
He
like,
cannot be everywhere at once.
yeah, so it's one of those things which I think it's one of those things that works because Superman is not a real person and is a character and sort of a platonic ideal. But I think if I were in a similar situation, even if my personality somehow changed to be as pure and good and heroic as Superman, I think I might genuinely break and go insane just from the knowledge of horrible things happening that I just couldn't stop because I can't be in everywhere at once.
Yeah.
Just the knowledge, like being able to hear a child being abused, for example, but you can't do anything about it because you're putting out a fire or something like that. Right? I think that would break me.
I mean,
And there are
it's obviously
Yes?
not the exact same because he doesn't have the same power system, but they do, something relatively similar with All Might at the very start, because they, when he still has, the flickering embers of One for All, he's still trying to do all his hero stuff because he can't, he can't turn down someone in need. But in the end, it affects not just him, but, students that he is supposed to be protecting because he's not there, because he's wasted his time doing something that, let's be honest, other heroes could have done.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where he's much weaker than Superman, and even then, but also he's at the power ceiling of his world.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right? He's weaker, but he's at the power
hero.
ceiling of his world. So he is like, even someone at the power ceiling of their world runs into that issue, and there are people stronger than Superman in a lot of cases. So, like,
it's selective and variable in that.
it's variable in that sense, but yes, but yeah, I think just I could not do that because I don't think I, as a human being, who knows, maybe Kryptonians are just built different, but I, as a human being, cannot reconcile the fact that I have these selfish desires for having my own life, but also wanting to make the world a better place and help people.
I get
Like,
that.
I
honestly.
think I would feel guilt whenever I was living my own life.
But here's the
Because
thing,
I would-
Fuzzy.
Yeah.
Part of living your own life is also making sure that you don't burn
Yes.
out.
It's the principle of put your oxygen mask on first
Yes,
before
exactly.
assisting others. But the problem is that when it's not as simple as one action, it becomes so much more complicated. Because, like, I like the analogy of you should always put your oxygen mask on first before you think about others. The problem with the analogy is that life is not a simple action where you can do one thing and then you're ready to think about others. Because life is such a more complicated system, I think the issue is that when you focus, if you try to focus again, the opposite, the logical extreme of put your oxygen mask on first is the thing we discussed, which is F you, I got mine.
Well, the other extreme that, well, not the other extreme, but another good argument can be made of get yourself some sleep. You're no good exhausted. Yes,
that is a much more relevant argument to day-to-day life. But yeah, it's just it's a balancing act that is very difficult.
Yes,
and it's difficult enough for a regular-ass human being. And that
honestly,
is
I do think that the executing on that very well is what helps to make characters like Captain America, All Might, Superman so exemplary.
Yes,
when they are handled well.
Yeah, it's harder in comic books, but I still think everyone should read Action Comics issue 1000. Because while there's some that are not great, that it's essentially an anthology of short Superman comics that sort of exemplify what makes Superman such a good character.
Yeah.
So it's definitely one I recommend everyone reads. Because
I would also say if you're looking for good Superman stories, if you are interested in, depending on if you're reading or watching, I would say All-Star Superman is another good one. Both the animated film and the comic, as well as Kingdom Come is another very good one in comic form. And in terms of animation, Superman vs. Elite is also an excellent Superman story.
Yeah. So, again, we're basically fundamentally getting into the point of tropes are tools, as our character traits.
Mm-hmm.
And you can have a character who is a genuinely good person be compelling.
Yep.
And that's something I think a lot of authors have forgotten.
It's all in the execution.
A lot of authors and a lot of audiences.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Because I still remember the fucking shit that people were throwing at Izumi and Shikimori, and it was just like, nah, fuck you. He's a good dude. He's a good boyfriend. There isn't drama there. Fuck you.
People were complaining about him?
Yes.
Yeah.
I would marry that boy.
Whatchamacallit?
Shikimori would fight you for that.
Still sis, though.
But yeah, whatchamacallit? Yeah, it reminds me, like, you have shit like Zack Snyder saying, like, maybe hypothetically he would have had Batman get raped in a prison or some shit. It's like, way to completely fucking miss, everything of a point. Like, what the hell are you thinking, man? How does that remotely fit Batman? Like, it's one thing if you're creating your own original characters and, like, trying to do whatever shit you want to do with them, but, like, if you're trying to adapt a character, at least try to stay true to who the character is.
What's
and, like,
funny is that just because a character is built on the foundation of trauma doesn't mean that means, oh, you have free license to change up the trauma however you want, because different traumas affect people in different ways.
Yeah, no, and Bruce Wayne's, like, foundational trauma is the loss of his parents to a random mugging.
Yeah, there you can, like, a skilled writer could probably handle that storyline for Batman. But that would result in a very different Batman than the Batman that has existed for like 100 years at this point.
And there are plenty of examples of Batman being written well. Hell, Mill has gotten hooked on one of them recently.
Wayne Family Adventures.
Yes, very good stuff. Speaking of lighthearted fluffs, Fuzzy, I think you would enjoy it.
You probably
outside
would, yeah.
Like, there is some angst here and there in it, but, like, honestly, I think it'd be right up your fucking alley.
It's really not Bankst Man? Batman without some angst.
There is a little bit of angst there, but yeah, it's mostly very lighthearted and fun.
There was a fairly serious storyline to start off the most recent run of chapters.
Season,
so.
yeah.
But yeah,
But we should probably call it here because we are about 2.25 hours in.
Yeah. Any final thoughts you want to discuss before we wrap up, Fuzzy?
no, I think I just we touched on a lot of topics, and I think we haven't really
We haven't had a really good talkie stream in a while.
we haven't,
With the three of us.
but also we've touched on a lot of topics, but I don't think we've exhausted those topics. We can revisit them in different contexts. So
Yep.
I think it's nice to have a proper literary talkie stream after a while.
Also, I love that Mill is going full Santa Claus badass with the hammer candy cane.
Candy cane
Oh.
sledgehammer, yeah.
It's great.
Speaking of Santa Claus badass, are y'all aware of one of the latest ongoing series by the Beastars author?
No.
No.
It's called Sanda. It's about a boy who somehow gains the power to turn into buff Santa Claus.
That's hilarious.
And given the fact that it's the Beastars author, I'm sure it's going to be a trip. So I actually have it
absolutely.
open. I have it as one of my tabs. I'm
Yeah.
probably gonna read it and be the canary in the mines.
Speaking of reading, before we wrap up, I'm about halfway through the Cradle anthology book.
Ah, good.
Yeah, I haven't started that yet. I just have been distracted.
It's really fun so far.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it personally. But yeah, we should wrap it up here. Thank you everyone for joining us as we yapped for 2.25 hours.
Living up to our reputations as professional yappers.
Yes, that is our job description. We will basically be on our usual schedule, though again with the cast members varying depending on availability. Tuesdays, Thursdays, Saturdays, and Sundays. Mill?
Yeah, thank you everybody for watching. Please do give us a follow here on Twitch and all that YouTube stuff.
Like and subscribe, leave a comment down below, press that bell icon, it'll do whatever I know.
And otherwise, hopefully we will see you on Thursday. Yeah, today's Tuesday. See you on Thursday. Good night.